To launch the DHDR viewer, first log in as a user that's been configured for DHDR using their OneID account. So I'm going to click the Login with OneID button. I'm going to make sure that I have OneID selected under the organization field. And then I'm going to log in as the user. This is the user I'm going to use. It's just a test user in the PST environment. Assuming the binding between the EMR user account and the OneID account has already been made previously, the user will automatically be logged in as that user. The first thing they'll see is the Select a UAO dialog. If the user has only one UAO configured within the admin portal, this dialog will not appear and that UAO will automatically be selected. In this case, this user has 3 UAOs, so I'm going to select one manually. Upon selection of the UAO, the EMR will do a couple more redirects to the OneID service and then back into the EMR to complete the login process. From here, we can select the patient that we'd like to open DHDR for, navigate to the medication section of the EMR, and click on the DHDR button from the left. This will launch the DHDR viewer. The first thing the user will be presented with when the DHDR search has been performed is the warning dialog. So this dialog will appear every single time a search is performed against the DHDR service unless the user has elected to dismiss it until next login, which can be done by clicking the Dismiss Until Next Login button. Clicking Close will close it for now, but the next time the search is performed, the dialog will appear again. Additionally, the user can click here to view more information about what is available through the DHDR service to healthcare providers. Once the user has closed the dialog, in this case I'll dismiss it until next login, they are now free to use the viewer as desired. Within the DHDR viewer there are two main sections, the medications view and the pharmacy services view. The medications view is the default view and is the view where the user can see the patient's medications both from the DHDR service as well as the EMR system. The pharmacy services view similarly allows the user to view the pharmacy service events from the DHDR service as well as the EMR medications from within the system. One of the first things you may notice when looking at this view is the patient demographics header at the top of the page. This is where the user can see information about the patient that they currently have in context. The information available is as follows: patient's last name, first name, middle name, health card number, phone number, date of birth, their age in years calculated based on their date of birth, and their gender. This demographic header is available both at the top of the medications page and the pharmacy services page. Another important field is the retrieve date in the top right corner of the screen. This is a date that is returned from the DHDR service and represents the exact date and time that the medications were retrieved from the service. It is available in both the medications view as well as the pharmacy services view. It is important to note that the medications returned in the medications view and the pharmacy services in the pharmacy services view are both returned in the same request. Therefore, the retrieve date will be the same between these two views. Within the medications view, there are two main tables. The first table is the DHDR medications table, and as the name suggests, this is a list of all of the patient's medications returned from the DHDR service. The second table is the EMR medications table. This table by default is collapsed. However, clicking to expand this table allows the user the ability to compare both the DHDR medications and the EMR medications side by side. Similarly, within the pharmacy service events view, we have the DHDR pharmacy service events table and the EMR medications table, which is collapsed by default. Expanding the EMR medications table will allow the user to compare the DHDR pharmacy service events, of which this user has none, and their EMR medications. By default, records returned from the DHDR service are displayed in a grouped format. Within the DHDR medications view, the records are grouped by generic name, strength, and dosage form. And within the DHDR pharmacy service events view, the records are grouped by the pharmacy service type field. Groups are represented by the record within that group that has the most recent dispense date. The user can also see how many records are contained within a group by the RX count column on the right-hand side of the screen. By clicking the down chevron arrow on the left next to that record, we can expand the group and see the remaining records within it. These items are ordered by dispense date in descending order. Records that don't match the grouping criteria of any other records are displayed as a group of 1. You can see this by the RX count on the right being displayed as 1, and the chevron on the left is disabled, meaning the group cannot be expanded because this is a single record. To ungroup these, just click the Ungroup button at the top right corner of the screen, and this will display the records as individual records rather than groups. To retain that group formatting, just simply click the Group button at the top right corner of the screen, and the records will be grouped once again. At the top of both the DHDR medications table and the DHDR pharmacy services table, you'll notice a section labeled Search Parameter that has a few items listed. These are the search parameters that are sent to the DHDR service when the application is fetching the DHDR medications and the DHDR pharmacy service events. As mentioned previously, these medications and pharmacy service events are fetched at the same time, so these parameters are actually shared between both views. By default, the application will automatically search using the patient's HCN and a dispense date range of 120 days in the past. These parameters can be changed and edited by clicking the Edit button to the right of the Search Parameters section to launch the Parameters view. It is here that the user is able to customize the two available search parameters, the first one being the Search By field. In this field, we have the option of HCN, HCN and date of birth, HCN and gender, or HCN, date of birth, and gender. These will automatically be populated from the patient's demographic information. The next field is the dispense date range. From here, the user is given 3 different options to populate this field. The first is to simply select a start and end date by clicking on a date and then another date to create a range and clicking OK. The second is to type in a number of days relative to today down in the days field. So if I say 200 days and hit enter, it'll automatically generate a range between 200 days ago and to today. And lastly, we can click the All button, which will generate a range from the patient's date of birth until today. Clicking Apply will requery the DHDR service using the selected search parameters. If we switch between views, you will notice that the selected dispense date range that I've just applied is also available within the Pharmacy Service Events view. Again, because these 2 different types of records are returned in the same request. To reset these search parameters back to their default state, simply click the Clear button on the right-hand side of the screen. Another important feature is the Result Filters feature. Result filters are different from the search parameters, as these are not sent to the DHDR service. Instead, once the user has performed a search against the DHDR service and results have been returned, the user can then apply these filters to the returned results set. To apply new filters, the user can click the Filters button at the top right of the DHDR medications table to launch the Result Filters dialog. The first field you'll notice is the Dispense Date Range field. This filter is similar to the Dispense Date Range search parameter, however this is only applied to the result set, not sent to the service. The rest of the fields are what are considered type-ahead fields that are powered by the returned results from the service. What that means is if there are only 3 records returned from the service, and between those 3 records there are only 2 unique prescribers, the prescriber name filter field will only allow the user to filter by one of the 2 available. For instance, you can see there's maybe 5 or 6 in the prescriber field for the returned records. If we go into the filters selection view, and we go to the prescriber field, we can see that the only available prescribers are those that are contained within the result sets. Again, this is a type-ahead field, so you can use it to search for the specific filter you would like. Selecting the filter and clicking Apply will in fact apply the filter and filter the records. To edit the filters, simply click the Edit button next to the Result Filters section. From here you can add more or remove them by clicking the X next to the field. To clear the filters, simply click the Clear button on the right side of the Result Filters section. This will return the records to their original state. For all three of the available tables, those being the DHDR medications table, the DHDR pharmacy service events table, and the shared EMR medications table, the user is provided with the functionality to sort the records within each table by any specific column. By default, the records are sorted by the dispense date with the most recent first. To sort by a different column, simply click the heading above that column. In this case, I'll sort by generic. When the user first clicks the generic heading, it will be sorted in ascending order, as indicated by the up arrow next to the heading. To switch the sort order, simply click the heading again, and now the records are sorted in descending order, as indicated by the down arrow. To remove the sort and return the records to their original sort order, simply click the heading a third time. The arrow will disappear and the records will be returned to their original state. To view further information about a specific medication dispense event or a pharmacy service event, simply click the item from the list. Doing so will navigate the user to the details view for the selected medication dispense event or the pharmacy service event, respectively. The information available is the DHDR patient that is associated to the DHDR medication dispense event, information about the DHDR medication dispense event itself, the prescriber within the DHDR system that is associated to the medication dispense event, and lastly, the DHDR pharmacist and pharmacy details that are associated to the DHDR medication dispense event. To return to the medications view, simply click the medication item from the navigation bar. Given the requirement set by the DHDR service that at a minimum the patient's HCN must be included as a search parameter, it is not possible to access the DHDR for a patient that does not have an HCN configured within the EMR. If a user attempts to launch the viewer for a patient that does not have an HCN, it will not query the service, and instead will display an error message in the bottom right corner indicating that the user does not have a valid Ontario health card number. Additionally, where the HCN would normally be displayed within the patient demographic header, the word missing in red is displayed instead. This also applies if the assigned HCN is a non-Ontario HCN or if the HCN is not valid. Within the DHDR service, there exists an edge case in which another patient has the same HCN, or the information entered for a specific patient was entered in multiple ways. To account for this, every record returned from DHDR is compared against the selected patient for inconsistencies. If the first name, last name, date of birth, or gender for one or more records does not coincide with the values set for the selected patient within the EMR, a red warning is displayed at the top of the page indicating that a mismatch exists. This warning can be dismissed if necessary by clicking the red X in the top right corner. For each record that contains a mismatch, the patient's name under the DHDR patient column is highlighted in red. Hovering the red patient name will launch a tooltip that exposes the fields that did not match for that record. In this case, this record has a mismatch for the patient's date of birth. Now, it's important to note that this does not necessarily mean that the record is incorrect or that it does not belong to the selected patient. It just means that the user should take extra caution to ensure the accuracy of these specific records. To print either of the views, simply use the standard built-in browser print functionality. In this case, I'll use right-click print. When the print preview loads, at the top of the first page, you will see the EMR confidentiality statement and a warning regarding sort order and potential filtering that may have been applied by the user prior to printing. At the top of every page, you will see the clinic information as well as patient demographic information. The printout will contain all of the records on all of the pages within each expanded table that match the current search parameters, result filters, and sort order as applied by the user prior to printing. This means that if there are 16 records and only 4 of them on the first page, all 16 will be printed, regardless of the page. If the user applies a filter that reduces that number down to only 2 records, only those 2 records will be printed in the table. For example, if I apply a brand name filter, which has reduced the number of records in the DHDR medications table down to 1, and I print, you will only see 1 record in the DHDR medications table. Additionally, if a table is collapsed when the print is initiated, that table will not be included in the printout. For example, if I collapse the DHDR medications table, but leave the EMR medications table expanded, and initiate a print, only the EMR medications table is printed. Similarly, reversing the tables and clicking print, only the DHDR medications table is printed. When both are expanded and initiating a print, both tables are included within the print. At the top of each table, next to its heading, you will notice a number in parentheses. This is the total number of records being printed in that table. To the right of that, there is a printed on date that indicates the exact date and time that the print was initiated. Additionally, the search, filter, and sort warning message is also included at the bottom of every page. Some patients may have indicated within the DHDR service that some or all of their medications require explicit consent before a user can view them. When the app detects that there is a consent block returned from this service, it launches a dialog to inform the user and give them some possible options. The options are as follows: cancel, which simply closes the dialog without proceeding; refuse, which also closes the dialog without proceeding, but also adds a log entry to the database indicating that the patient has refused the consent; and lastly, continue, which proceeds with the consent override workflow. From here we can see the patient consent override view, which is maintained by the province, where the user can perform the consent override action for the selected patient. To perform the consent override, the user will first need to select which records they need access to. In this case, for DHDR, we only need medications. Next, they'll have to indicate who provided the consent for the unblock, whether it was the patient or their substitute decision maker. In this case, I'll indicate that it was the patient. Next, the user will print this form. Once printed, they will confirm that they have printed and signed the consent form, click Unblock Records, and confirm the unblock. Now that the user has completed the consent block override process, all of the patient's records will be available to them for viewing.